Today we are doing outfield part one because we're going to have a heavy outfield breakdown. There's a lot of outfield. There's lots of deep position to get to, obviously. There's a million of them. And you also have to roster about like 6 or 7 of them probably in most leagues. So we're talking about outfield, big position. This is a swing position. This is a position that can win or lose a league. Your next tier, tier four, just a step below those guys. Is appropriately titled a step below. You have 3 guys here. Who are they?
Step below tier is Adolis Garcia, Randy Arozarena, and Cody Bellinger. Those are my step below guys.
I noticed how you pronounced Juan, kind of like Juan, but I don't think you pronounce Adolis. I think it's Adolis.
Adolis? I thought it was Adolis. I mean,
And
I
and,
think
and I want to
Adolis
defer
sounds
to you
right.
because you pronounced Juan so well, and I think you pronounce Juan correctly, and I say it like incorrectly. But
Juan?
no, it's
Juan.
no, it's Juan, but it's got to have a little bit more flavor to it than
Juan.
just Juan.
Juan. Sure,
Juan,
sure.
you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually, I've watched a ton of Texas games when they were in the playoffs last year, and I don't remember one way or the other. That's something
I
that's
thought it was
just slipped my mind.
Adolis.
It could be. It absolutely could be.
I'm
I
not
don't know
sure.
off the top of my
Yeah, the
head.
guy was ridiculous in the playoffs. And sometimes we see
Yeah.
that. Like, remember Randy Arozarena, and he's in this tier also. So they kind of remind me of the same guy because they both had that playoff run where they just popped off and became super
Yeah.
popular in one playoff run. And all of a sudden everyone was on them, but then they didn't really keep it up for a full season after that. And sometimes we fall in love with these guys that we saw pop up in the playoffs and or pop off in the playoffs, I should say. And then it's like, yeah, but when it comes down to it, they're still the same guy. So do you have a fear that with really both of these guys with Garcia and Arozarena?
I have it more with Garcia than a Rosarena. I think
Yeah, I think
Cowboy
Arozarena's
Randy
proved it a couple
is,
times at this
yeah,
point.
I
Yeah.
think Cowboy's good to go. The only hesitancy I have about Garcia, and I've been on this train for many years, and I know a lot of other people have been, and a lot of other people, there's two sides. If you're either all in on Garcia or you're kind of all out because he's got a very high strikeout rate. He swings a lot of pitches, so it's one of those like he could fall off a cliff very, very quickly. But he hasn't over the last 2 years. Like he's done it. So it's kind of hard to continue to knock him. So that's why if we're talking about a worse value, I'm going to say Garcia just because I'm not one of the people who's in on him, but I can't fault someone for being in on him,
My
because he's done
favorite,
it.
yeah, my favorite in this tier group, honestly, is Bellinger. It's another prove it year. He's in Chicago. He's still in his prime. What's he going to be, 29 this year? He's still the prime of his career. He's still young. And he's got another prove it deal essentially at home with a little bit more of a guarantee. So it's not the pressure of a prove it deal, but it's also still playing for another big contract if he wants to opt out in Chicago, where he had the best year of his career, where he's comfortable. I love Cody Bellinger this year. I think the Cubs are going to be sneaky good. And I think Cody Bellinger is going to be in the middle of that lineup, a big part of that. So I love Cody Bellinger in this tier.
I agree. He's going 55. If you need a first base or outfield at that point, I have no problem taking. I think Cody's a great pick. He's going to have better counting stats, I think, this year than last year. I think his average may regress. Some of his power numbers may regress a little,
Yeah, that
but
would be
I'm
more
not
to the
worried.
means of what he's been in his
Right,
career. Yes.
right. I'm not worried about Cody. I think Cody will be a great, great fit. I think his floor is extremely high. That's one thing I like
Yes,
about him.
exactly. Now the next tier, and it's crazy that one of the names in this tier just jumps off the paper, and maybe we'll talk about him when we do next episode when we do some of the worst values. But the next tier, tier five, is the big question marks. Who do you have here?
Big question marks, tier five. I lead it off with Nolan Jones. Then there's Jazz Chisholm Jr. and then Michael Trout. Uh, it's
And
kind of weird seeing Mike
that's just
Trout
a
as low
name
as he
that
is, but
pops in your head. That's like this is the best player in the league, quote unquote, or the consensus best player in the league for the last bunch of years. But between the health, the team, and Anthony Rendon, when he gave that interview, almost sounded like he was saying what Mike Trout has always thought. Did you not feel that way? Like Mike Trout never seems like he's fully committed to this, and I can't say that. I don't know the guy. I actually have a friend who knows him personally. Wild story, totally, maybe for another time. But it might be a little bit like rude and presumptuous to say that he also doesn't value winning and value baseball to the point that maybe as fans we kind of want them to, that childhood in us, but I don't think he does. And I don't know how much of a priority playing at all costs through nicks and bruises is for Mike Trout at this point in his career. And so that's really the biggest issue with him because we know that when he plays, if he plays 150 games, he'll probably be one of the best players in the league. He'll probably hit 40 home runs and steal 40 bases and bat 300. That's just a fact. But in that lineup, with that team and that culture that seems to be just absolute trash, I'd be pretty nervous about Mike Trout.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a bunch of great points, but the one that does concern me the most, I mean, obviously all of those are concerns, but it's not just the injury history, it's the type of injury history. Like back problems tend to linger for a long time. And he's got like a chronic back issue it's never going to go away. So
That's Mike David Wright stuff, you know?
yeah. And so I think Mike Trout still has plenty in the tank. And I think he's still going to give us many good years, but I don't think that they're going to be the Mike Trout years that we're hoping for, or that he could still deliver if fully healthy. And that's why I'm probably avoiding him at his 63 ADP. If he in a few years is dropping down to 100, 150, maybe I'm taking the gamble, but just not a top 70 pick at
He
this
almost had
point.
the fall off like a Matt Kemp. You remember,
Yeah.
maybe early 2010s, it was Matt Kemp every year was that number one guy in the draft. And then when he dropped, he just dropped. And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, stay away from this guy. And then he had that point where it's like, hey, he's still Matt Kemp. So he's a decent value pick at like pick number 120. But it's kind of that quick fall off. Who's your favorite of the three if in that spot, in that range? If you had to pick between, I guess it's pretty much between Jazz Chisholm and Nolan Jones.
I think, and this kind of goes against every fiber because I'm not a huge Nolan Jones guy, but I am going to take Nolan Jones simply because I think he's hit his ceiling. I don't think he's got a whole lot more to offer. I mean, he's got power, he's got speed, he's in a great ballpark in Coors. The team's not great around him. And the only reason though I put him above Jazz is because again, Jazz just needs to stay healthy. We know what Jazz is capable of. Jazz is another guy who he could be a potential tier 2 guy if everything clicks for him. I mean, he's that good. And even with a shortened season last year, he still put up phenomenal numbers, phenomenal power speed numbers. But I think Nolan Jones is a little bit safer. So I'm going to take Nolan Jones over Jazz.